Then the Ashanti people, there is a piece of tribalism in politics. The Ashantis have never liked the Achimebuakwa people. So when they realized Park Grant had become very old, J.B. Dankwa was very preeminent. The Asantehene preferred Kwame Nkrumah to J.B. Dankwa.
President Akufo-Addo Ankasa close friend and Abuṣë Abuṣë any statement against Kwame Nkrumah say Nkrumah the founder of Ghana Independence Day inti won fa ho animonyam ne mo Nkrumah. As we speak, I bet you history upon history I expose Akufo-Addo kranyi din ababe expose ne papa ne sankrofobia arehopa. I have 4G, Bombardier subscribe. I then am I send be near my how do I tregu dear Connie dear baby Betty now so I who dear be Hannah in our men could be subscribe next money or said in San Kedians already in feigning chimney and candy one chairman. A young lawyer from Anokye and a Barbontin, both people a Barbontin. Achi a year Akufo-Addo general Akana dream a channel. Yes, he building at the more. Or school na nkasa o school no with history Akufo-Addo was na see na enyamate wa Ghana ti bia Akufo-Addo ignorance in this history in Ghana dia ono old school ni ye amaye hu say ba independence ono ne family ni sa UGC no crowd omonka ho kra because bra na Kwame Nkrumah fight for the independence in Ghana. No more so draw petition call Abuṣë say and a man for independence na the Kwame Nkrumah. Or a lot of wicked things are more against Kwame Nkrumah as we speak and ne independence na we are all sing on the year na when and bri power or shall say I can say even the Ghana flag ne o kase si unchen mpono Ghana flag na o kase si unchen mpono you know Kwame Nkrumah ene this adrene by and no decals ni kika boom with the help of some people on bet on no pan a champion and no crumpo so we independence there unti ni because nyo no kwa na ehwanya so once celebrating the grandpa other country the best celebrating come on inkutin sema I
don't know whether you caught me. But I said that you can't have Nkrumah with, especially what some of those who later would become, I don't want to use that word, in the fight against independence, now claim that he is not the founder. But let's get into what the president has said in recent times about Nkrumah not being the founder, but one of the founders. From where you sit, what is your reading of this matter?
Then let me also acknowledge the president. My uncle Modibo Khan told me that they were friends, and President Akufo-Addo recommended that he should be made the Chief Justice of Ghana. And today, as I sit here, let me acknowledge that the family recognizes what he thought of doing for us. In fact, if he was the president then, Modibo Khan would have become the Chief Justice of Ghana. Now, going into this whole thing, I will start by praising my senior and my lecturer for the very honest assessment he has made. And that is where I also stand, that a lot of people started the war before Kwame Nkrumah was brought in. But when you wanted to push him back to 1897, the professor made you to know that the aim of the Aborigines Rights Protection Society was to protest against the Lands Bill. And they never went to Britain to ask for independence. And when they became successful in that regard, the organization dwindled and eventually fizzled out its position to be taken by the National Congress of British West Africa. Now it is true that the United Gold Coast Convention was formed by a group of people and with the slogan, self-government within the shortest possible time. That alone should tell you that they were also aimed at fighting for independence. But where I want to go is the fact that Pa Grant was a businessman, a timber merchant. All the other leading members of the party were full-time businessmen and or lawyers who did not have time to do active politics. Two.
We know this was like part-time work for them, as and when they had time.
Part-time. And to make it even worse, people should begin to know that most of the leading members were also members of the colonial parliament, the legislative assembly. Sorry, it was the legislative council, like Grant representing 2nd, Dankwa representing Achimebuakwa, Awuno Williams, Obechebi, Lamte. They were already members of the colonial parliament and therefore never in a haste for the fight for independence. And so they thought that there must be somebody who would have to be the active administrator of the UGCC, do it full-time, give him a car, give him £100 a month, so that the organization would be kept relevant until the time that the white man, the colonial master, decide to leave the country. Then we'll be seen as a people prepared to take over. And that was why Nkrumah was brought in after the suggestion of Akwajay. Now when he came, he had a different notion altogether, as Professor was saying. Professor would agree with me. He's an astute political scientist. He was my lecturer. Professor would agree with me that Kwame Nkrumah had studied in the US with about 50 countries coming together as one. And so he never believed in the idea of looking for independence for the colony. And at that time, the colony was Western Province, 2nd Takoradi, Central Province, Cape Coast, Eastern Province, Accra. Transvolta Togoland was not part of it. Ashanti was being ruled by proclamations and they're not. Yes. Yeah. So UGCC, even when you look at the bill, our city, you see that the people captured there, none of them was from Volta. Who told you that Voltarians have not all the time had great scholars to be part of this organization? Talk about Northerners, talk about Ashanti, Bono. They were not there because it was restricted to the colony. And everybody knows that J.B. Dankwa in his writings had suggested the name Akanman for Ghana. Then when Nkrumah came, he augmented the two branches of the UGCC he came to find. One in Accra, one in 2nd. You know, within 4 months, he had transformed it into 500 branches. And they were angry with him. Second, 1948 riots. It was suspected that Nkrumah and Anokye were those who pushed the ex-servicemen to do all that they did. In any case, Anokye joined the others. So when they were writing their caution statements, they were very careful not to talk about independence. It was Nkrumah who, in his raw caution statement, copy of which I have read, stated that he was the one, he would just take the blame for all that had happened because he wanted independence. And then the rest were put in prison in Kumasi. He was put in prison in Tamale. Then the Watson Commission said they should be released, and they were released. Thereafter, as Professor had already told you, his ideas were fundamentally different from the rest. So what will happen was that he will break away. When he broke away, and this is the beginning of the story, when Kwame Nkrumah broke away, and what makes him the founder of the nation is that, having formed the CPP, he made sure, as his organization skills had always been, the party would be a national party. But the National Liberation Movement that broke away from the CPP because of cocoa and other agitations became an Ashanti party. Then the northern people who felt that during the colonial period, the white man had designed an imaginary line between the north and south so that no northerners should be sent to school, so that they would do watchman work, so many things unprintable. You know, felt after independence, they would, instead of the white man, serve the black man. That one, they would decide to go away. So they formed the Northern People's Party. Then the Transvolta people...
Which later would become problematic moving forward because we didn't want parties formed on ethnic lines.
So the later, that would become problematic. Later would move for the avoidance of discrimination, yeah, so that all of them will be put together. So you will see that Transvoter Togoland Party and the SG Anto, SD Dombo's Party, Bafwa Koto's Party, and then Gashifi Mope Muslim Association Party were all sectional or sectorial in kind, and therefore could not have won independence for the country. That was the reason why in the 1954 elections, the CPP won its seats in every part of the country. But NLM was restricted to Ashanti, and then others restricted to wherever they came from. So you see how we say Nkrumah was the founder of the nation. But for Kwame Nkrumah, the UGCC having been dismantled after the 1951 election. In fact, we had 38 seats, and Kwame Nkrumah won 34 seats. Correct. UGCC won 3, independent 1. And after that, they phased it out. Then the Ashanti people, there is a piece of tribalism in politics. The Ashantis have never liked the Achimebuakwa people. So when they realized Park had become very old, J.B. Dankwa was very preeminent. The Asantehene preferred Kwame Nkrumah to J.B. Dankwa. So when his people would not allow him, they would break away from the CPP. They rather went for Professor Kofi Abrefa Buzia, then an Ashanti. I say then an Ashanti because even though a Bono from Wenchi, at that time, Bono was Western Ashanti. So they chose their own man. Please, J.B. Dankwa died in 1965. He didn't die in 1954. But the Matimeho tradition, the UP tradition, and the NLM tradition did not go for him. Did not go for him. So he became politically irrelevant. Then, because of the troubles, Nkrumah couldn't have independence. And then a new one, 1956. Please, if you want me to read something here, very short.
Just briefly.
Brief. I will say that in
Where are you reading from?
Oh, very good. Proceedings of the Ghana Academy of Arts and Sciences. Yes, 1974.
Dated which year? 1974.
Yes, and this is the piece written by Joe Appiah. And the title is The Man J.B. Dankwa. And he says that in 1950, the dawning of Goko politics, speaking about Dankwa, lost his Abuakwa constituency seat to a nephew of his. J.B. was shocked to the marrow of his bones by this defeat. Then to continue from page 29, he says, in 1955, the State Council of his home state of Achimebuakwa, in recognition of all his services, installed J.B. as the Trafohene of Achimebuakwa. That was the highest accolade that he got to. He fizzled out. But today, well, before I say but today, let's continue that. 9 full years before we had independence, Kwame Nkrumah had put together the students of Mfansepim, Adesadel and Augustins and their teachers who had been dismissed because they had gone out to support all the demonstrations for the 1948 riots. He put them together, set up a school at Cape Coast, and he called the name of the school Ghana National College. That was 9 full years before Ghana's independence. So please, I would never accept any argument to the effect that J.B. Dankwa, who had written in all the treatises that he made that Ghana should be called Akanman, would metaphors into becoming the originator of the name Ghana. 2, it was Nkrumah who moved the motion of destiny, and Professor knows it, that we needed our independence. And please, I hope you also agree with me when I say that Buzia wrote a letter to the British government with the title, "Are you leaving us so soon?"
I'm aware of.
Certainly, I love people like this. That's why I started by saying he's very dishonest. So if Buzia...
Dishonest?
I started by saying very honest. It was a slip of tongue. It's good you corrected me. So if Buzia and Dankwa are coming from the same stock, and as Professor said, at a certain point they wanted to pull us back, and this person with all his charisma pushed us forward, and we had independence, internal one up to 1957, and then the de jure one, the de jure I mentioned, from 1957 upwards. He, on the days, that day he stood up, it was with his comrades that he declared independence. This book, if I had continued, would have told you that J.B. Dankwa was standing in the crowd observing Kwame Nkrumah and others. Again, Nkrumah gave us our national flag. You will read that he and that Madam Theodosia Okon, they put together and then they made the flag. Please, it was not anybody but Nkrumah who who looked at the flag, and the woman even said, let me put in so many stars, like the American flag. And then Nkrumah said, I need only one, the black star. And then the national anthem, Philip Beho was commissioned by Nkrumah to do it. And then the national crest, Anokye, was commissioned by Nkrumah to do it. And then what again? The name, I have said it. And then on 6th March, Nkrumah mentioned Ghana. J.B. Dankwa was not there to give any support. Buzia did not appear, even though he was opposition leader, because he had written to the British not to give us independence. He was so scared to be on the podium that day, even though it should have been a national affair. And so, if from class 1, F.K. Boa and all others, including even Kwame Nkrumah's arch enemy, Dubois, would tell us in history that Kwame Nkrumah was the founder of Ghana, and our president, whom I admire so much, is telling us that he was not the founder. I believe it will be a very much of an abuse of language.
Hold for me there. There was a comment.
Abuṣë for your lawyer from Anokye near Brie Pana, just working on Adrian Yako for just Enyas and get to a funny statement or the Bible and Timber say, in Kwame Nkrumah and the founder of independence, and I say, you know, Kwane champion the independence. The history we are deal go say unkuye history university unkuye history or SHS unkuye history or baby our grandpa we history about Ghana history no so papa crank and was someone this is the history about Ghana history na I will say teaching will be a amount for naso amount for person who try a keep history no most history no wabe bi kroneni amobie hu de wom so yiti lawyer Frimpong Anokye in some more they are to ya or chese open akofado pa na dan for pa no na so want na ho mane say Ghana history all ma de ni say blue all mane meka say red abrekwa no kra ni say de ni blue want na mane yesa and what Jesus statement no about abeka against a Kwame Nkrumah is an abuse of language. Tebe ombra bontin or some bra bontin may retracted the work no cran ten. So we were no. Send inquire from a ban on and lecture no emma new who e beer when yini the real fee history a hold roll. Tis an inquire from a ban on and change history in China we be swatching. It's an Ukraine work channel to Nima ya catch and on Bamber retracted statement. And his statement a fatal cry as a president. Because the only one party say, we are president, not country, we are president also no, we name so history be but cry at that country can put him the history of Ghana. Or him the relevance of Kwame Nkrumah in Ghana's history. And that country now will afford this no won't name anything winning how much be. So imagine say be a winning me and say no winning yen can say winning but you see what to a Joe say Brabber retracted that statement no. And yes sir any papa grandma no party no bidding in quanto kwama or my bino ama wabe benefit. And no, I didn't know benefiting. Who say you should benefit? I didn't know benefit. I go send it back on any mass. Any yema. It is a lawyer from Anokye seminar or say even JB down kwa grandpa no celebrity was a school bidding or super so dini din kotu to sono grandpa no or che niema or ye a 80 or my way kakrebi no apon ya me hu say na che say oni adwem pa krampo makwam nkoma che say or fighting my independence no in sema papa ya ke mu duye pa na o kan nyina boma conclude say ombra me retract ombra no me pa cho e wa de na waka na na pa no ntino onkasa na dan pa ni to ye bone won kanche or can congratulate to me ombra me retract and yes I de niam bebre na no ye den odba bontin afa once ni subscribe na share ma onya so ye den enye binti no hu adwem pa wo e akofo adu training nkrofo e de etrim ana pese de musia akram